Hi, I'm Patricia Alian. I'd like to give you an introduction to the Kemet School's in-depth study of the Gosford Glyphs located in Australia. The first time Joseph and I viewed the Gosford Glyphs, we saw them as posts on our Facebook group page about 2.5 years ago. Although it was obvious they were made to look like Egyptian hieroglyphs, we couldn't help but question their authenticity. It wasn't long after that our friend Sonia Van Gelder from Australia contacted us to tell us that she was working with a team called the Forgotten Origins Team with Steve and Evan Strong that was investigating the Gosford Glyph site. She asked if we could help them with the interpretations of the glyphs. After a quick glance and giving us a few short translations, Joseph remarked that it would take a great deal of in-depth research to give them the attention they deserved. This past January, when Beatrice Alian and I were planning a lecture tour in Australia, Sonia and Evan invited us to come and explore the Gosford site for ourselves. It was a wonderful adventure, and we were blessed to meet and be led by some of the local original elders who gifted us with much background information about the site that was also known to be a powerful sacred area for women. We were especially taken with the custodial elder of the women's lore of this area, who sadly has recently passed, and out of respect I won't speak her name. She shared many stories with us that evening, including what the ancestors had told her about the Egyptians who had visited this area in ancient times. We showed her a short video that the Kemet School created with a brief interpretation of what we all felt were authentic hieroglyphs. She was very excited and grateful and said that Yosef and Muhammad's interpretation was completely in line with the knowledge she had been given. We made a promise to her that we would make a much more in-depth presentation when we returned to Egypt in order to help her and the many other original people of the area in their efforts to save and protect this site for future generations and to honor the connection between these two ancient civilizations. When we were taken to the site, I was immediately impacted by the energy of the area and by the energy of the glyphs themselves. In that moment, I felt that they were indeed authentic and had an amazing story to tell. Beatrice, as one of the Kemet team's photographers, was able to take many pictures of the hieroglyphs for us to bring back to Joseph and Muhammad for an intense examination. I would like to note that both Beatrice and I had powerful experiences at the Gosford site that will never be forgotten. And now it's time to introduce Joseph and Muhammad. Joseph Alian, my husband and son of Abdel Hakim Alian, has been studying hieroglyph symbolism and the mysteries of the ancient Egyptian civilization for most of his life. Muhammad Ibrahim is a licensed tour guide with over 15 years' experience in the field. He has a bachelor's degree in ancient Egyptian civilization studies, including Egyptian hieroglyphs, and he is a teacher of hieroglyphs.
Okay, let's get started. I think we need to address the question, did the ancient Egyptians have the capability of traveling overseas?
Yes, sure. The evidences we can find from the ancient Egyptian stories and pictures left on the sites and on the Egyptian tombs and from small or big objects, showing that the ships industry was very popular during the ancient Egyptian times, starting from what we call it the pre-dynastic time. And this is one of the pictures we can see. This is a kind of pottery jar from what we call it pre-dynastic time. According to Egyptologists, this is around or before 3300 BC. And we can see the Egyptians had made drawings of a boat. Maybe it's not a huge, but the idea of having boats and ships existed from the time. And by the beginning of the Egyptian time, according to Egyptologists also 3300 BC, what we call it Old Kingdom, New Kingdom, they developed doing ships like the ship, the famous one we have, the solar boat of King Cheops. This is the solar boat of King Khufu, the one found behind the Great Pyramid. This is the best boat we have and the biggest was ever found in Egypt and from the ancient world. This boat is 43.6 meters long. And according to the statistics we have, that this is maybe longer twice more than the three boats Christopher Columbus used to explore America. Okay. The longest ship Christopher Columbus used was around 17 meters. So this shows that the ancient Egyptians were able to do big boats, and also they were able to sail in the Red Sea, and I believe in the Indian Ocean. What are the proof for this? The famous story about Queen Hatshepsut and her famous expedition to Punt land. Some Egyptologists, they say that Punt land may be Somalia or Ethiopia, or maybe another African country in the southern part of Africa. But no way can be like Sudan or Djibouti. You know, it was a far country from Egypt. And the pictures of such boats are depicted on the El Deir al-Bahari temple of Hatshepsut in the West Bank in Luxor. And this is a clear evidence that the ancient Egyptians, they traveled overseas, and they had the ability and the capability for such trips. Another evidences we can read from stories. Maybe it is not strong evidence like Hatshepsut, but still kind of clear information, like we have the famous story of the, what we call it, the shipwrecked sailor, that they were going to mines, to the royal mines outside of Egypt, because if they were going to Egyptian mines, they would use their foot to go on foot through the desert, or they will use the felucca boats or the Nile boats if the place is existed in Egypt, like in Aswan or the northwest of Egypt. But they mentioned that they used the harbor on the Red Sea, and they used boats or ships going to there. And you must know that the ancient Egyptians made differences between the word boat and the word ship. So the word boat is familiar to be used in the Nile, but the word ship is made especially for the sea. Okay, so he said he faced some strange phenomena, and the waves and the winds sent him to an island. And if we say an island, he can live on the island, and he felt strange in that island. If it is an island on the Nile, there is no need to continue the story, because he will be in Egypt. He will not feel lost in Egypt. But he said he felt lost, and he found a snake, and then he told him that other ships will come within a week to take you back to your country or to your land. So we understand that the ancient Egyptians didn't only sail or go travel overseas, but that was common. Such trips were happening, I think, monthly or with a certain schedule.
You've convinced me that
Mm-hmm.
that the ancient Egyptians could travel by sea, and probably did, but
Mhm.
during what time periods?
Okay, so if we follow the Egyptian stories, we have a story of Bibi II, one of the kings of the 6th dynasty, and the story is saying that he sent an expedition to Central Africa. So this is, in my opinion, the oldest date as a strong story or a strong evidence. The oldest date we can use
That we
for
find
travel.
documented,
Mhm.
but there's no reason not to believe that possibly
Exactly.
they had been traveling.
According to other evidences, but maybe not very strong, like the written things,
Mhm.
because our mentality now are using or depending on written information.
Correct.
So according to written information, it will be Bibi II. It's around 2300 BC. But other sources are giving us the story that the ancient Egyptians used to travel maybe before the dynasties time, before 3500 BC. And in the end of the lecture, I will show you some of the such evidences.
Fantastic.
So, as I was explaining, that Yusuf brought us some pictures showing the Egyptian ships sailing in a different environment from Egypt, from the Nile, because the kind of sea life we can see, that is not the same kind of fish or sea animals
It's like
we can
a
see.
squid?
We can see a squid, yes, we can see a lobster.
Yes.
Okay, that is all existed in the Red Sea or the Indian Ocean. And we can understand from this picture that the ancient Egyptians, if they traveled once or twice or 3 times, they may not recognize such creatures. But because they recognized them and they managed to draw them in this perfection, it means that they traveled for hundreds, maybe thousands of times.
And these depictions were found on, going back to Old Kingdom tombs and
These
mortuary
depictions
temples?
from the Old Kingdom, they depicted the Nile
Okay.
life, but those depictions existed in Hatshepsut temple from the famous story again, Bond
Okay.
expedition.
18th dynasty.
From the New Kingdom time, 18th dynasty.
Okay.
So they're not just sailing.
Yeah,
Also-
so as we explained, so it wasn't also, if we read the story of Hatshepsut carefully, it wasn't one ship sailing. It was a fleet sailing to Bond land. And we could count 4 boats, huge boats. How we say huge? What is the reason or the scale we can say huge or no? If we look to the picture, we can see they loaded the ship with lots of goods and lots of trees. If we have a small boat or a small ship, it will be impossible to load so many trees in the ship. Okay, and it will be difficult for the reason why they traveled to Bond land if they will not bring so much things from there. Also, another evidence I use about the capability of sailing on the sailing overseas, that by the end of the New Kingdom time, we have 2 famous names for Egyptian rulers or pharaohs: Merenbetah, son of Ramses II, and Ramses III, King Merenbetah and King Ramses III. There are famous stories for the two kings that they engaged in navy battles with what we call them the sea people. We think the sea people are the southern of Europe. When they ran out of sources, they found that invading the African coast will be a kind of renewing their sources for living. So they attacked the African coast. Of course, Egypt was the richest country at that time. So they attacked Egypt twice, during the time of King Merenbetah and during the time of King Ramses III. According to the evidences we have and the stories of Egyptologists, that is the time of Merenbetah the first. Merenbetah, that is the first battle we have in the sea, which is not making any sense to me, because we defeated the fleet of the sea people completely. It was a great victory. So if we are fighting, if we are using the sea for the first time, how come we defeat those people with lots of experience? We understand that south of Europe, they used to trade with each other, and we have the famous stories about the Vikings trading with Tunisia, trading with Lebanon, ancient Phoenicia. So they had the capability traveling and fighting in the sea. So if the Egyptians started this for the first time, it would be a great failure, and it will be the army will be defeated. But destroying their fleet and having full control on their navy soldiers, which has happened, and we understand that the Egyptian king sent or reshaped the shape of this southern of the Mediterranean, south of Mediterranean, the islands. Like he sent what we call them the blessed people to Palestine. Even the name of South Italy was mentioned, Sardinia, Sirdi. Crete island was mentioned as a part from those people who attacked Egypt. And the same story repeated during the time of King Ramses III. So that is clear evidence that the ancient Egyptians were very
Capable
capable to
yes. Navigating
yes,
and yes.
and of course we don't forget the harbors we found on the Red Sea and in Alexandria, which is called Abu Qir, the modern name. We found an ancient harbor there.
Both on the Red Sea and on the
And the
Mediterranean,
Mediterranean,
and they're
yes.
excavating both sites right now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is the picture depicted on the temple of Ramses III, Medinat Habu, in the West Bank and Luxor, showing the Egyptian fleet fighting with the sea people. And you can see they made their soldiers and their boats in a great shape. If we look to the left side of the picture, we can see the Egyptian soldier standing and shooting an arrow it means that the boat or the ship had a great balance, enabled them to use arrows in that great skill. So back to the story of Cheops. Cheops used to import cedar wood from Lebanon. And it is impossible to think or to imagine that they used to bring cedar wood on foot or in the back of the camels or donkeys. No, it was mentioned as the imported cedar wood through the Mediterranean, through the sea. And that was one of the famous locations to import cedar wood.
Yes.
May not want to include that.
Not to mention also that there is a very famous canal known as Sesostris Canal, which was digged to connect between the River Nile and the Red Sea. And this way you can connect actually both the Red Sea and the Mediterranean Sea through the River Nile. By crossing from this canal to the Red Sea, you can sail from the Red Sea to the Indian Ocean, and the other way that you can sail also come from the Red Sea and use the same canal and get to the River Nile and then sail to the Mediterranean Sea.
When is this dated?
This is as Yusuf explained, yes, was the first idea, was indirect link between the Mediterranean and the Suez Canal and the Red Sea, and was replaced in modern time with Suez Canal. So this canal was made by Senusert III from the Middle Kingdom of the Egyptian history around 1500 BC.
You say used by, does that mean it might
Made-
have been
made
built?
by.
Oh, made by.
Made by.
Could have-
Or
could have
used by.
been
It
Yes,
could have been
it
older,
could be.
okay.
And that canal was lasted till the beginning of the Arabs' time in Egypt, but then it was neglected. Okay. So the idea of having ships, again we repeat this information, started from the beginning of the Egyptian civilization, maybe before, till the end. And if you visit Saqqara tombs, you can see by your own eyes, they represent ships in every tomb from Saqqara tombs. And we are not talking about a small boat. If we can count, if we can realize how big is the ship, and we can count around 20 persons with 20 oars in this side, in the left side.
Yeah.
It could be the same on the other side, on the right side. And we can also recognize how big are the sails. So such kind of sails are sailing on the sea, not in the River Nile.
And this is the Old Kingdom tomb of Meroruca?
Exactly.
Yes.
Okay.
This is one of the tombs of Saqqara for Meroruca from the 6th dynasty.
Wonderful. Well, I know you both have a wealth, much more material available, but you've done a wonderful job of showing that they obviously did have the capability to travel the 7 seas. So now, I think an important question would be, do you think that the Gosford Glyphs represent Egyptian hieroglyphs?
Yes.
Definitely.
From the first sight, from the first look, I feel it. And you must know that when we made our researches, me and Yusuf, we made it separately in the beginning. He did it by himself, and then me too. And then when we met, we found that both of us reached the same result without contacting each other for more than 2 weeks. So yes, definitely it is ancient Egyptian writings.
No doubt about it. These are ancient Egyptian writings, and as Muhammad is gonna show for you now and explain for you also how professional identifies the symbols. Go ahead.
Okay. First, let's give you an idea about what we call it the code of the ancient Egyptian letters. If we look to what we call it Alan Gardner sign list of the ancient Egyptian signs, we will see that he classified the Egyptian signs to certain groups. Like the first group we can see, they made the man and the relative pictures and different actions for a man. Like you can see a man standing, stretching his hands, putting his hand in his mouth, fighting, kneeling, praying, old man, young man, drowning, standing, sitting. And he gave that group the letter A. And each symbol in this group had a number. So if I say A1, it means I'm talking about this symbol, the first symbol. A2, about that certain symbol. So no chances for mistakes. And the rest of the signs like he made the group of women, group of knitters, parts of the body, eyes, okay? So this code we're going to use explaining the symbols of the Gosford Glyphs, and to understand which symbol we could recognize from the Gosford Glyphs is what in our sign list. And this is not the only sign list we used. We used another sign list from a dictionary for Vigus 2012, and the third one we used is New Gardner sign list.
So you used 3 different sources because you couldn't find all of the symbols in one source?
Exactly.
Fantastic.
And that is not a mistake of the writings. That is because of the lake, I can call it lake of the information in a separate sign list. Sign lists couldn't house all the letters and the symbols. That's why I used many sources, and those are not the only sources I used. There is one of the signs I couldn't find in any sign list, but it is represented in the Egyptian temples. I found the symbol in Komombo temple. And I will show you the list, the sign, the symbol, while I'm explaining the symbols.
So now you're explaining to the audience that how you are identifying each and every one of the symbols on the Gosford Glyphs. And these texts are all from what time period?
I believe according to the writings, I could recognize the writings dating back to the late Egyptian time.
Now the sources I was asking about, like the...
Such sources.
Yeah, because we've already established that the Gosford Glyphs were first discovered in the early 1900s that we're aware of, that's been documented. And I'm just curious that these source books that you used, when are they dated?
I understand, okay. When the publics could understand or read hieroglyphics or have the proper book for understanding hieroglyphics, not before 1950.
Beautiful.
The studies of hieroglyphics started with Jean-François Champollion, 1920, but it was for few people, for less than 50 people maybe, or less than 100 people all over the world. But after some famous Egyptologists like Wallace Budge, like Alan Gardner, they started to write their books, and I believe it became popular, not for the normal public people, but for the educated people who are looking for this kind of information, but again, not before 1950.
Wow.
Yeah.
That says a lot right there.
And some of the symbols in Gosford, when you search, as Muhammad was just saying, when you search for it in the dictionaries, you don't find it. And some of it only existed in the dictionaries of 2012.
Yes.
So this is
Like the Vickers Dictionary, 2012.
Some of the symbols were only found in that one, not in Alan Gardner's old
Symbols and meanings also.
Yeah.
Well, I'm excited. Let's get started.
Okay.
Okay. So we're going to see now the symbol from on the right side. We can see that is the symbol. We can see it in Gosford, and on the left side, this is the same symbol from the list of the sign lists like Gardner, and you can see I gave it, or I found that the symbol to the left side has the code A40. A40. That's why I gave the same code to the symbol to the right side from Gosford. And you can judge by yourself, is it different or the same symbol, okay? Especially after I show you more symbols. This is the second symbol, okay? Both are seated men. If we go back to the first, you can see this is the man with a beard and with a headdress, okay? The second one, similar, but there is a kind of something or a tool or like a scepter above his knee. And we can see the perfect details existed on the sign list by Gardner. And this one has the code A42.
Does each code have a different meaning?
The code is not giving a different meaning. It means different picture.
Different style,
different
of the
style.
same
Yes,
glyph.
exactly.
Thank you.
But then the symbol itself gives a different meaning. But the symbol doesn't have one meaning all the time. According to the rest of the word, the symbol can represent, like this, as an example, this picture, it means ships. It can represent righteousness, okay? But in another different word, it can mean another meaning. So it's not the same meaning all the time, okay? So you can see that the symbols from Gosford are matching or is the same with our Egyptian symbols. And also there are other pictures we can see. You must understand that the ancient Egyptians depend on their letters. They used the symbols from nature, from the environment around them. They used human shape, they used eyes, heads, legs, hands, and different types of hands, arms, fingers, okay? So that is what we call it hieroglyphics. Even the wildlife, they use the lion, lioness, cats, dogs, elephants, hippos, giraffes, trees, different types of trees, boats.
So some symbols have phonetic, or some symbols actually refer to like a letter, and some actually to like a form of thought or.
Yes, we're gonna come to this. Some of the symbols are representing individual letters, and other symbols are representing a word, okay? This is one of the interesting signs. This is the back side of the lion, the hip and the tail of the lion. And you can see it is the same in the Egyptian sign list. This is our famous word Nefer. So many people who love Nefertiti or Nefertari, they must understand that this is the origin of the name Nefer. And this is the answer of your question. It is one symbol, but we can read it as 3 letters. Nefer, N-F-R.
Right.
And Nefer in this case means beautiful. It has other meanings, but the famous meaning is beautiful. But in this text, we will find and discover together that the word Nefer has a different meaning than beautiful.
I've heard it could also be resonant tone or.
It means harmony.
Harmony,
Also.
yes.
It means, yeah. But it will have different meaning as we're going to explain.
Yeah. As you said that not all the symbols were understood, and even if the ones we understand, they could have different meanings.
Exactly. That's what I wanted to point out.
There is something I use as an evidence, because some people will ask me, okay, when you asked me the question about do you think it is authentic or no, I said definitely yes. Okay. So I'm going to show you now some evidences I found that why I used 3 sources, 3 different sources for the codes and for identifying the symbols. Because some of the symbols were represented with what we can call it the famous shape, or the usual shape used by the ancient Egyptian scribes and writers. Okay, but there are other kind or different shapes were represented, but maybe not in a large scale like the other famous ones. Okay, so the one who wrote the Gosford Glyphs used some of those, if we can call it, some of those rare examples for those symbols, not common symbols, not the famous ones we see it in our temples or in our tombs, but he used kind of rare shapes which is existed also in our tombs and temples, but not in the same number of the famous ones. But to be honest, or to explain better, that we found those rare symbols listed on those sign lists. Like if we go to Alan Gardner's sign list, we will not find those symbols. Okay, like this symbol, we call it F37A. This is the difference. If we go to F37, we will find different shape. Okay, so this is the picture of the symbol. We call it F37. It represents the backbone of the Egyptian body, and maybe a piece of flesh in the end, and 4 ribs from the ribs. Okay, so if we go back to our symbol, it represents something similar like this. Okay, so how could we make our judgment that this is the same symbol or no? Okay, according to another sign list. So we can find the same symbol is listed, and not only the same, but with its variation. As you can see, we have F37A, D, E, J, B, and F.
And when they include all of these variations, they're saying that these have actually all been found in scripts written somewhere.
Right.
Yes, of course.
They don't imagine or try to enhance the symbol by themselves. That was found. Definitely found in at least one place, but I believe it was found in many places, but not popular. Like Karnak Temple, Luxor Temple, the tombs of Valley of the Kings. Those are the famous sources we use to find the symbols. Okay, but don't forget that we have thousands of papyrus, thousands of broken pieces of stones, and they all have letters, some what we call it rare symbols like this. Okay.
The thing here is that when somebody uses rare symbols that some of the experts in the hieroglyphs wouldn't know about it 50 years ago.
Have only recently found.
Exactly.
Yes.
It only exists today, like in the 2012 dictionaries after more research, but like in Gardner's list, it's not there, as Muhammad was just shown.
It is not listed. Yes.
That's why he felt its authenticity, because this cannot be copied.
Exactly.
Because 50 years ago, there was no writings that contained it. Nobody studied 50 years ago.
So you
Not
had
even
to have a
20 years
working
ago.
knowledge of the language of hieroglyphs in order to understand or even know about some of these rare symbols.
True,
Yeah.
and not only we cannot say they know hieroglyphic. This type of writings need something, I can call it over or beyond ordinary knowledge of hieroglyphics. Ordinary knowledge will lead you to the famous symbol. Like if we look to the screen now, we're going to see this symbol, F46. F46, the famous one. Why I call it the famous? Because I made this research, but before I made this research, I call it this symbol, not this famous symbol. Now I understand that there is another symbol similar, but maybe taking different direction, or at least there are some changes a little bit. But before doing this research, I used to understand that F46 is this symbol on the right side only. Okay, but after I made the research and after I looked in many sources, I found that there is another symbol called F46A. It is the opposite or the mirror picture of F46. Okay, so if we are talking about someone who knows hieroglyphic and didn't know that there is something like this existed, and this is not a mistake, because all of us are reaching certain levels of education and knowledge according to our readings and researches. Okay, so it means that the one who wrote the Gosford Glyphs, he understood this very easy. It was very easy for him to understand the famous or the regular representation of this symbol, and maybe the public representation of the same letter. Okay, so this is another evidence. If someone who had the knowledge of hieroglyphics is going to write this, he will use the famous symbol F46. Okay, there is no need to use F46A. Also, some will say some letters, some who knows hieroglyphic, okay? Some people who know hieroglyphic will say some letters are facing different direction from the usual direction. Because we understand that if we see a text from hieroglyphics and the letters facing right side, all the other letters must face the right side. And I explained before that the Egyptian used the symbols from the environment, and it had faces, and it has like front sides, back sides. It can show right or left, okay, facing right or facing left. So in this picture we can see this snake is facing right side, but the original one in the list, okay, in the list facing left. But when you go to the Egyptian tombs and temples, you will find both are represented. One sometimes to the left and one other times to the right side. So that is not a law we force on the writings. No, this is our imagination about the writings. But the actual writings facing the both sides. Okay? So that is not a mistake. That is different type of writing.
So you're saying that those that call it a hoax are saying that it's because they believe it's a hoax because the writings are going in different directions, and you're addressing that was normal and did happen.
Look, I will not say normal, but I will say our point of view is against this. But who said our point of view is always right? And as I explained before, that so many letters are not existed in the sign lists and existed in the tombs. And other directions of letters existed in the walls of the temples and tombs and not existed in the temples.
So you're saying you've seen this occur in many different places. That's what I want to establish, that this isn't a rare thing, that you have seen this before.
We have seen
So we
writings
can't
going
cite
against
this,
each other.
yes.
Actually, Muhammad pointed it out when we were visiting also the tomb of T.
Yes.
There are writings going against each other, and there is another tomb that has some writings going against each other behind the pyramid of Titi, and it all goes back to the Old Kingdom. But about the people who thinks that Gosford Glyphs is a hoax, I have found out that most of the people who shares this, they share it from one single article, or like he made 4 parts of this article, but it's the same man. He doesn't even represent all his name, and I don't know why. And in his opinion, that these glyphs are not representing, are not spelling any words except for the ones that spelling the names of Khufu and the one beside it.
Maybe you guys have already proved that not to be the case.
Yes.
Okay, let me show you this picture. This is a letter or a symbol we found in the Gosford Glyphs. Okay. So it shows as a combination between 2 letters, H or Ha and R. If you search in the 3 sign lists I mentioned, you will not find this symbol. Okay. So easily I can say this is a mistake or this is something wrong. Okay, because I can't find this in the lists. And where I do my studies, from where? From the lists, from those,
From the dictionaries.
from the books.
Yeah.
Okay, and books we all respect and we appreciate what they did. Okay, so immediately I will say this is not right. This is because this is not found in those sources. So this is a mistake. But what about this picture? This picture from the back side of the temple of Komombo, and if you have the chance to come with me or come with us in a trip visiting the temple, I will show you the symbol by your own eyes. We can see the symbol is represented here in the temple. Can you see it? And I made the
Right
red
above
arrow.
Tefnut.
Yeah. Okay. And to be generous with you, I will read that line for you to understand the meaning of that letter. This letter originally means another word or a different symbol called Hina. Hina means with or and. But during the Greek time or the late Egyptian time, that the letter took different shape, or the symbol took different shape and became this shape. So it says Tifnut, Neter Tifnut, with her brother Shu in the city. And they mean in the city, they are talking about Komombo, Satin. Okay, that's the name of the ancient name of the city. So we understand that, so we are not only found the symbol, but also because of the rest of the writings, we can understand the meaning of this symbol. Okay?
Also helps you to date the site, apparently.
Exactly.
Get to this point.
Yes.